Have you ever stared into the dark and felt it staring right back at you? Have you ever wondered if life itself might be the illusion? And that death, not life, could be the only honest answer? When the smiles fade, when the noise dies down, when all that's left is a silent scream echoing inside you, would you dare to face it? Would you dare to admit that maybe existence is a lie? Leo Tolstoy did. At the height of his fame, surrounded by applause and wealth, he was haunted by a single, unrelenting question. Why live at all, if death is inevitable? He searched through philosophy, religion, society, and found only hollow echoes. No comfort, no certainty, no escape. Only the abyss, yawning wider with every passing day. In this video, we will walk with Tolstoy through that abyss. We will not look away. We will not sugarcoat the truth. Because to survive what Tolstoy saw, you must first be willing to die. Not in body, but in the illusions you cling to. If you have the courage to keep watching, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. Not because it's just another video, but because it might just be the confrontation you've been running from. Topic 1. The question that drowned his soul. There are questions so heavy that no answer can lift them. For Tolstoy, it was simple. Why should I live if death is inevitable? This thought did not come like a guest to his mind. It invaded him like a flood, a silent, merciless force that swept away all his comforts. At first, he tried to silence it. He drowned it with work, with family, with fame. But the question always returned, whispering in the silence between his triumphs, growing louder in the stillness of his victories. It was a sound he could no longer unhear. He realized that no achievement could shield him. No applause could erase the truth that every breath he took brought him closer to nothingness. And if death would erase it all, what was the point of building anything at all? The sensation was suffocating. Imagine standing on a frozen lake, hearing the ice crack beneath your feet, knowing you will fall, but unable to move. That was Tolstoy's life at the peak of his success. He envied the peasants who worked the fields, those who sang simple songs and lived without philosophical despair. They seemed to know something he didn't. They seemed untouched by the plague of consciousness that gnawed at his soul. But no imitation could save him. Tolstoy knew he couldn't unknow what he now knew. He couldn't simply choose happiness, like a man deciding between two coats. The truth had already infected him, like poison in the blood. He wrote that life was a stupid and evil joke, when viewed through reason. Logic stripped life of meaning. Science only confirmed the futility. Progress was a lie. Civilization, a mask. Behind it all, death. The more he searched for meaning, the more absurdity he found. The brighter he tried to light the room, the larger the shadows grew. Philosophy gave him language but no salvation. He looked to religion, but what he found were empty rituals, dead words recited by men who feared the same darkness he did. Their hymns rang hollow against the stone walls of his dread. Even love, the purest of human experiences, seemed powerless. How could he cling to love, knowing that death would tear it from his grasp? How could anything matter if oblivion awaited it all? The despair became physical. He feared ropes and knives not because he hated life, but because he craved an end to the agony of questioning. He had to hide them from himself like a drunkard hiding his bottle. In one terrifying realization, Tolstoy saw that intelligence, wealth, and success had not elevated him, they had isolated him. They had sharpened his awareness until existence itself became unbearable. He did not hate life. He hated the betrayal of it, the promise of meaning, so vividly felt in youth, evaporating like mist under the scorching gaze of reason. This was not the despair of a weak man. It was the despair of someone strong enough to look reality in the face and refuse to lie about what he saw. It was not a flaw. It was a final, brutal honesty. And yet, despite all the horror, he clung to a faint ember within him. A stubborn flicker that said, "There must be something more. There must be something true." It was this ember that prevented him from stepping fully into the darkness. It was this ember that whispered, "Search deeper. Burn away the lies. Find what remains. Tolstoy had touched the bottom of the well. There was no deeper descent. From here, the only question was whether he would drown, or somehow find a way to breathe underwater. Have you ever faced a moment like this? A moment when life itself felt thinner than a dream? Tell me in the comments, what question has haunted you the most? Topic 2. The silent violence of success. Success did not save Tolstoy. It betrayed him. The very things he had been taught to worship, fame, fortune, knowledge, became the knives that carved meaning out of his life. He had everything the world promised would bring happiness. Titles, lands, adoration. Yet inside him grew a wasteland, silent and cold. Every new achievement was another brick in the tomb he was building around his soul. He realized that success is a kind of quiet violence. It distracts you just long enough for death to tighten its grip. It lulls you into thinking you are ascending, even as the ground beneath you rots. He wrote that his fame felt like standing on a mountain, only to realize the mountain was made of corpses. Every step upward had been a step away from himself, away from truth. The world applauded him for his novels, his wisdom, his status. But these praises, once sweet, turned to ashes in his mouth. They could not answer the screaming silence inside him. He began to see success as a prison made of gold. The doors were wide open. No guards. No chains. But no escape either. He was trapped by the invisible walls of his own victories. He envied the simple, the forgotten, the nameless. They had no mountains to fall from. They could live and die without the terror of having squandered their only life-chasing illusions. Tolstoy saw that the world's definition of success is a lie. It is a trick designed to keep men busy until they die, never noticing that the race had no finish line, only an abyss. This realization shattered him. It broke the story he had been living. No more would he believe that progress was salvation. No more would he bow to the gods of ambition. But breaking the story meant breaking himself. Without the myth of success, he had no identity left. Who was he, if not the great Tolstoy? What was left, if all he had built was hollow? He compared himself to a man hanging from a branch over a deep pit. The branch was rotting. Below was death. Above, no hope. And all around, the sweetness of success distracted him from the fall. He tried to rebuild his life on smaller joys, family, nature, writing. But even these could not fully silence the voice inside him, the voice that asked, "Is this enough to justify your death?" He understood then that no external achievement could answer an internal void. No amount of applause could fill a soul dying of thirst for truth. And yet, despite the ruins, he did not give up. He believed that if success was a lie, then perhaps failure could reveal the truth. If the world's prizes were meaningless, then surrender might be liberation. He would have to unlearn everything he had ever been taught. He would have to destroy the old Tolstoy to find the man he was meant to become. A brutal resurrection. Have you ever reached a goal only to feel more lost than before? Share your story in the comments. Let's speak the truth the world is too afraid to hear. Topic 3. The dead end of reason. Reason was supposed to be Tolstoy's savior. It had guided him through literature, politics, education. But when he turned reason against existence itself, he found it led only to a dead end. He thought that if he reasoned hard enough, he could find a purpose that would withstand death. That logic would build a bridge across the abyss. But every logical path ended in the same place: futility. The more he understood about the world, the less it made sense. Science explained the how of things, but never the why. Philosophy described the structure of the house but could not tell him why it was worth living in. He realized that reason was a tool, not a guide. It could dissect the body but not breathe life into it. It could name the stars but could not tell him why he should care they existed. In the cold light of reason, all values collapsed. Good and evil became arbitrary. Beauty became a trick of evolution. Love became a chemical accident. Under reason's gaze, life withered. This truth did not free him. It crushed him. It was like opening a treasure chest and finding it filled with dust and bones. The prize he had chased turned to ash in his hands. He envied those who could believe without thinking. those who could live by faith or instinct. For them, meaning was a given, not a problem to be solved. Their ignorance protected their joy. But Tolstoy could not unknow what he knew. His mind, sharpened by years of inquiry, could not simply surrender to myth or custom. His intelligence, once his pride, became his executioner. He wrestled with this paradox for years. Could he live in good faith, knowing what he knew? Or was he doomed to live dishonestly if he pretended meaning existed where there was none? He tried to find a bridge between reason and faith, but every attempt felt like a lie. Every compromise tasted like betrayal. He refused to pretend. If truth demanded despair, he would embrace despair. And yet, in his darkest moments, he began to suspect that reason was not the highest faculty. That perhaps, beyond reason, there was something deeper, something that reason could not grasp but only hint at. He saw that the human heart is not made only for logic. It is made for longing, for awe, for terror, for mystery. And that maybe, just maybe, the answer he sought could not be calculated. This was the beginning of a deeper search. A search not for intellectual certainty, but for a kind of living truth. A truth that could survive death, even if it defied explanation. In surrendering reason's crown, Tolstoy did not become stupid. He became wiser. He understood that reason, like fire, is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. Have you ever reached the limits of thinking and realized that answers don't live there? Tell me below, when did reason fail you, and what did you find beyond it? Topic 4. The darkness that taught him to see. There are nights so dark that you wonder if the sun will ever rise again. Tolstoy lived inside such a night, not for hours, but for years. A darkness without stars, without hope. It stripped him of everything he thought he was. It burned away the comforting stories, the ambitions, the dreams of legacy. It left only raw existence, trembling before the void. In that darkness, he realized something few ever do, that true sight is born not from light, but from surviving the absence of it. That until you lose everything, you cannot truly see anything. He saw the illusions that men clung to, their money, their fame, their pride, as shadows on a wall. Beautiful, perhaps, but still shadows. Still lies. He wrote that life, stripped of its illusions, appeared to him like a cruel joke, a senseless cycle of birth, suffering, and death. Yet strangely, facing this horror, he began to feel more awake. The darkness had purified him. It had destroyed the distractions, the false comforts. And what remained was a brutal, naked hunger for something real, something death could not erase. He began to understand that meaning could not be borrowed. It had to be found, or forged, in the fires of personal despair. No one else could give it to you. No teacher. No priest. No government. No lover. No friend. Meaning was not a gift. It was a battle. In this realization, Tolstoy began to shift. He stopped asking, "What is the meaning of life?" and started asking, "How must I live to create meaning, even in the face of death?" It was a small shift, but it changed everything. No longer was he a passive victim of cosmic cruelty. He became an active creator, wrestling meaning out of the void with his bare hands. The darkness did not disappear. It never does. But now it had a purpose. It became the forge where his soul could be reforged, stronger, purer, freer. He wrote that true life begins only after one has accepted the certainty of death, not as a future event, but as a present reality. To live is to live knowing you are already dying. This is not a truth you can visit for an hour and then forget. It must become the air you breathe, the fire you walk through daily, if you want it to transform you. Tolstoy's despair taught him a new kind of faith, not the blind faith of institutions, but the fierce faith of a man who has seen the worst and still chooses to fight for the good. He emerged not with answers, but with a new question. How can I live a life so true that even death cannot make it meaningless? This question would guide him for the rest of his days. Not perfectly, not without stumbling, but always forward, into deeper honesty, deeper humanity. The darkness had not defeated him. It had initiated him. It had crowned him with the only wisdom worth having, the courage to live without guarantees. Have you ever walked through a darkness that changed you forever? Share your journey in the comments. Let's honor the places where we were broken and rebuilt. Topic 5. The death of the old Tolstoy. The man the world called Tolstoy had to die before the real Tolstoy could be born. Not in body, but in identity. In the myths he had built about himself. It is a terrifying thing to kill the person you have spent your whole life becoming. To look in the mirror and say, "This is not me. This was never me." But that is exactly what Tolstoy did. He dismantled the castle he had built brick by brick, even as the world begged him to stay inside it. He chose truth over comfort. He abandoned many of his former beliefs. He rejected the aristocratic life. He questioned his past writings. He turned away from the applause that had once fed his ego. He saw that all the roles he had played, nobleman, genius, reformer, were masks. Useful for survival, perhaps. But death made a mockery of them all. He began to live like a peasant, dressing simply, working with his hands, giving up possessions. He sought a life stripped of pretense, closer to the earth, closer to the soul. To many, it looked like madness. A grand fall from grace. But Tolstoy understood that he was not falling, he was shedding skin. Dying to what was false so that he could be reborn into what was real. This death was not easy. It cost him friends, status, peace in his household. It set him against the society he had once belonged to. It isolated him. But it also liberated him. For the first time, he was free to live not as a symbol, not as a product of expectation, but as a human being confronting eternity with open eyes. He no longer sought to impress. He sought to serve. To serve truth, to serve life itself, stripped of decoration and lies. He wrote that the meaning of life is found in love, not the romantic love of novels, but the love expressed in small, humble acts of compassion and service. He believed that true greatness is not measured by fame or fortune, but by how deeply you can love, how bravely you can tell the truth, how willingly you can embrace suffering for the sake of others. In choosing this path, Tolstoy was not escaping death. He was embracing it as a constant companion, a reminder to live urgently, sincerely, fully. The old Tolstoy, the one who had chased immortality through fame, was dead. The new Tolstoy sought a different kind of immortality, the kind written not in books, but in the invisible fabric of existence. He found meaning not by conquering death, but by living in such a way that death could not undo him. Have you ever felt the need to kill an old version of yourself to survive? Tell me in the comments, what part of you had to die so that something truer could live? Topic 6. A new faith born from despair. Faith, for Tolstoy, was not given, it was fought for. Wrestled from the teeth of despair. It was not belief in a dogma, but belief that life, even broken and bleeding, was still sacred. After years of spiritual starvation, he found a faith that did not require blindness. It was a faith forged in doubt, baptized in agony, and crowned with humility. He realized that to demand certainty was to reject the nature of life itself. That true faith is not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep walking even when the road vanishes. He saw that the simplest truths were the deepest. Love your neighbor. Forgive your enemies. Live humbly. Die honestly. These were not doctrines to debate. They were lifelines thrown into the abyss. His new faith did not erase the darkness. It gave him the strength to stand inside it without collapsing, to sing even while shivering in the storm. He no longer needed grand answers. He needed only the courage to do the next right thing, to plant seeds even if he would never see the harvest. He found peace not in eliminating suffering, but in transforming it, turning his own pain into compassion for others, his own fear into a bridge of solidarity. He rejected the idea that salvation was a reward after death. True salvation, he believed, was living rightly here and now, even in the shadow of death. This faith made him radical. Dangerous. He became a threat to the comfortable lies of church and state, because he insisted that true Christianity demanded actual sacrifice. He challenged not only governments but the very structures of society that depended on exploitation and violence. His pen became a sword against hypocrisy. But he also softened. He wept more easily. He saw beauty where once he saw only decay. A child's laughter. A field of wheat. The worn hands of a laborer. Signs of divinity hidden in plain sight. Tolstoy's final years were marked by this tension, the battle between his frail body and his awakened soul, between the death he accepted and the life he refused to betray. He did not find perfect peace. No honest man does. But he found a kind of trembling, sacred hope, a hope rooted not in illusions, but in the fierce, defiant act of loving life anyway. His faith was not a shield against pain. It was an invitation to walk through pain with eyes wide open, hands open, heart open. And through it, he left a legacy far deeper than his novels. A legacy of raw humanity, brokenness made beautiful, death embraced and yet defied. Have you ever built a new faith from the ashes of your old one? Tell me your story in the comments. Your scars are sacred. Topic 7. Die Before You Die, and Live. Tolstoy's descent into darkness was not his end, it was his rebirth. He walked through the corridors of despair, past the crumbling temples of reason and the graveyards of success, and found himself standing naked before existence. It was there, without illusions, that he began to see life not as a guarantee, but as a gift. Not as a story with a happy ending, but as a sacred struggle to live meaningfully despite death's certainty. He saw that true vision only comes after you have allowed the false self to die, the self that clings to titles, to certainty, to safety. In the ruins of everything he had been taught to worship, Tolstoy built something fierce and humble, a faith not in words, but in living truthfully. A courage not in the absence of fear, but in loving through fear. His journey reminds us that the questions we fear the most, about death, meaning, and despair, are not obstacles to life. They are the forge where life itself is purified. If you dare to walk through your own darkness, if you dare to let your old self die, you may find not answers, but something better, a way of living that even death cannot touch. If this journey spoke to you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. It's not just for algorithms, it's for you, for the version of yourself that refuses to live asleep. Share this video with someone who might be standing on the edge of their own darkness, wondering if it's worth going on. Remind them, it is. But only if you're willing to die before you die, and finally, truly live.